Good, ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to Citizen A, where we rank the week's current affairs with the best political team on television from a very Auckland perspective. Warning, we're as fair and balanced as Fox News. Joining me tonight on a revolving panel of bloggers and Auckland opinion shapers, she is from the Auckland University Department of Film, TV and Media Studies, blogger and commentator Phoebe Fletcher, and he is the editor of independent news site livenews.co.nz, commentator and journalist Selwyn Manning. Welcome to you both. Coming up tonight, Issue 1, Nick Smith's resignation. How did Key handle this, and does ACC's behaviour suggest bully boy tactics? Issue 2, Treasury suggests better outcomes for teachers by adding 3 students to classrooms. If Treasury can't get their forecast right, should they be messing with education? Issue 3, Government announced the slow strangulation of local councils, but who actually benefits? And we'll end the show on a final word, but let's kick things off with Issue 1. Nick Smith has resigned in the wake of a misuse of ministerial letterheads supporting a National Party activist, Bronwyn Puller. How was this messy fiasco handled? And does ACC bully Phoebe? Many environmentalist groups are sad to see Nick go, but 1 letter is a mistake, 2 letters is careless, isn't it? He had to go.
It is careless. I mean, this smacks of corruption, really, when you think about it. He should not be doing that on ministerial letterhead in his position. I think that there's a lot more to come out about this story. If you think about the notion that this woman also received a spreadsheet of 6,700 ACC claims, and we've also got Michelle Bogan involved in the equation. So when you look at it that way, he had to go. This was John Key cutting loose dead weight, and perhaps 2 days, he did deal with it in 2 days. I think Labor could have come out stronger initially on the attack, because that was the position that they needed to take.
Patrick Gower suggested very slow from Shearer on the uptake of this.
That was a vicious blog from Patrick Gower. Okay, where he sort of said Shearer should have gone in for the kill much earlier. But we are going to see this erupt. We've got all of the opposition parties now calling for a ministerial inquiry into what is going on with the ACC, including Nick Smith, because he's not protected by the Privacy Act in this instance as a minister. Did you feel, because I did, I was a little surprised, did you feel a bit sorry for Nick Smith, seeing how emotional he got at the end of his career? Well, I think it is hard not to see that and not feel a little bit sorry for him. But on the other hand, he's been one of the key figures that has been attempting to push down the levies and, therefore attempting to kind of reduce the number of claims that go through ACC. So when David Shearer seemed to be as slow as John Key in calling for a resignation, how do you think the PM handled this, and how much of this is actually the power factions within National moving around?
The power factions inside National are very, very much in a feral type situation. If you see where the information was leaked to, and our friend Cameron Slater, that there's an indication in my mind of where the demarcation lines sit as far as those in caucus and also those in cabinet to a degree inside National. As far as whether or not Shearer was too slow to manoeuvre on this, I think what we saw this week was a well-coordinated plan, not only from within Labor's front bench, but also all opposition parties. Most significantly, the interaction between Winston Peters, New Zealand First, and the Labor front bench on this. It was impressive politics. Nick Smith's demise came through, obviously, because of his own behaviour and his own risk-taking as a minister. But it would not have come to pass if 2 things had not come into alignment, and that was a press gallery and a wider media being prepared to actually go for the National Party when there's an issue of impropriety, perhaps, or if that's the right word, and certainly an opposition bench, an opposition pack that is actually hunting as a pack.
Phoebe, the other story here is how ACC treat those they turn down. Doesn't Bronwyn Puller deserve to have her case examined in light of ACC's own admission that they are declining too many compensation claims? Do you think they've bullied Bronwyn?
I wouldn't know without having all of the information from that case, although it was coming out this morning in the newspapers that she had actually complained about privacy numerous times before. There is also a lawyer that is an ACC advocate, I think his name was Peter Sars, I might be wrong on that, but he was saying that he was receiving private information from ACC claims that he was not dealing with in photocopied attachments at least 6 times a year. So there seems to be some looseness, but I would think that this was a spreadsheet, this was leaked. You know, that to me, a spreadsheet of 6,700 names is a bit different than a stack of photocopies where something wrong has been inserted. And that's what the ACC lawyer was saying about the other kind of privacy cases.
So when ACC have referred Bronwyn Pula to the police for an attempt to blackmail them, would Michelle Bogue have been so foolish to go along with a blackmail threat? Is ACC becoming a power unto themselves?
You know, we were not in that meeting, so we do not know how Michelle Bogue actually reacted. I support your premise there in the sense that Michelle Bogue's an extremely well-oiled politician in her own right. If she saw some discussion going on in a meeting that she was a part of, you can see her getting some distance to this. And I haven't seen any evidence that would suggest that she actually advocated a particular side on this. We're left clouded, to be frank. We do not know at the end of the day really what was suggested there, and if something was suggested as far as some sort of buy-off for privacy, which side of this, either the person seeking compensation or those that are in a position to consider it, where it came from.
That's
it's
right,
clouded
that's
on
right,
us.
that's right.
So, you know, it's all over the place. At the end of the day, this is, you know, like to build on what Phoebe was saying, it's more leaky than a sieve. You know, it's all over the place. This is in some ways a metaphor for where National has been in the last 2 months. It's all over the place. The other thing is that Nick Smith is the most significant cabinet minister for the John Key-led government at this particular time.
He's doing a lot of the intellectual grunt for a lot of the bills, right?
He is, in my view, the intellectual powerhouse when it comes to legislative programs, going from ideology, taking that idea, what they want, strategically actually considering it, going through a transformation for that ideology to become regulation and legislation. He is the best in that sphere. That's why they put him in as local government minister, because of the reforms that only on the 19th of March, 2 days before he resigned, Nick Smith putting out a statement detailing what that reform would be. You, Phoebe, and I know, and I'm sure many of the viewers out there know exactly what that reform was about. And it was about central government, the cabinet basically, the John Key-led cabinet, taking control over every council in the country and saying, you will not put up your rates or put that rate money into certain areas unless we agree about it. And that's what that reform was all about. They have not got Nick Smith there. They've got Jerry Brownlee tentatively trying to actually pick up the loose ends. But
he's
surely,
got Christchurch, right?
Look,
He's got Christchurch.
if they keep, sorry to keep going, but if they keep Brownlee in that position, what happens to Christchurch? You can't do both. These are major reforms. If they do keep him in that thing, it's a signal to everybody out there that voted for National and everybody else that they're short on talent.
They're in trouble, aren't they?
They're in trouble.
Question to both of you. How do you think New Zealanders, thousands of New Zealanders who have had their own compensation turned down by ACC, how do you think they're feeling watching the story suddenly move away from that issue to getting sort of convoluted and caught up with Nick Smith's problems? Do you think that they're going to be feeling that their issues have actually been listened to at all in this?
I think that this issue might not steer too far away from that. I think it might actually have the unfortunate impact for the National Party of pinging back to that. I mean, because we have had a bit of discussion in terms of the amount of claims that are getting turned down for elective surgery, and that we've got many more of those claims going through to be contested. We've got ACC themselves actually stepping in before some of those claims are contested to try and stop additional money being spent. So I think that this is, you know, very unfortunate for the National Party and, you know, very unfortunate for someone like Nick Smith in that leading those reforms to reduce the amount of spending for ACC. Now he's been caught out in a compromised position with somebody that, you know, perhaps did have a valid claim. We don't know. I know that people like Cactus Kate were saying, I think it was Cactus Kate was saying that parts of her claims sounded like they, you know, her complaints sounded like they were legitimate. So,
and that's probably, and you know, to be fair, it's not up for us to actually assess. I think the whole irony in this whole thing is ACC was put in place way back in the 70s to when New Zealanders forfeited the right to take people to court when they had an accident or entities to court. ACC was put in there as a compensation body. What we have seen, ironically, under National, but significantly under Nick Smith, ministerial, when he was a minister of ACC, is it being devolved into a thing that's not one where a body that's representing compensation, but one on representing how we're going to cut costs. And I would guess that a lot of people watching this program would start to think, well, I know someone, if it's not themselves, I know somebody that is deserving of ACC, has not got recourse to the law to actually get addressed, you know, for their loss of income. And ACC is not coughing up the goods.
That's right.
Now, the irony is that National and Nick Smith created that monster, and it's almost like Frankenstein's monster. They've created it, and ACC's turned around and gone back to Nick Smith and has destroyed his career in some way.
Final two words to describe Nick Smith's legacy.
Oh, I think his legacy is going to be tainted by this, to be honest, because you've got all of the other, you know, was another corruption kind of case that had come up about him. You know, his legacy is going to be in the policy that he put. Two words
to sum up.
I think his legacy in many areas will be that he was a skilled politician at cabinet level. His ministerial politics was skilled in the sense of putting stuff through the House. What he leaves behind is this huge vacuum inside the cabinet, and National does not have anybody to fill that shoes. It has the opportunity for John Key to bite the bullet, to not just go with the factions aligned to Stephen Joyce and put Simon Bridges and Nikki Kay into the executive in some minor role and blood them in so that they can be the new Brat Pack of 2001.
Well, good point. My 2 words to sum up his legacy: Nick Minute. Thank you, panel. Moving on to issue 2. Treasury have thrown a large, feral, hungry cat with a semi-automatic rifle amongst the education pigeons by suggesting efficiencies can be met if teachers add just 2 to 3 children to their class sizes. So, when Treasury are as out on growth figures as they consistently are, where do they get off lecturing other departments about cost cutting? Is Treasury part of the problem?
Treasury is not the solution to the problem. You know, and the problems are compounded at the classroom level when student or pupil numbers go up. You know, we all know that. Remember when we went to school, right? And the more you had in your class, by the time you got to high school, for example, and there were so many kids, there was so much disruption. Well, in the school I went to anyway.
Absolutely,
the experience of most. That you just got firmly in your brain that smaller numbers are actually the way to go.
Well, I'm a teacher. I'm sorry. I'm just going to kind of cut in there and say that as a teacher, that I can tell you from experience and from many of the other teachers that I know that handling a small class is much easier. You just don't have the time
to give
the attention to people. And it's Professor John Hattie that did that study of 5,000 different studies worldwide and found that actually teacher class size, the teacher to pupil ratio really did impact on whether we get people through.
I was chair of the board of establishing a new state-funded school, a secondary school down in South Auckland in around 2002 for 3-4 years. One of the things that we had to consider as an establishment board was that many of the students that would come to that school had a vocabulary, and I'm not saying an intelligence or an IQ thing, but a vocabulary much lower than the national average. That many of them were 2nd and 3rd generation people who, you know, their families had been here for 2-3 generations, that their parents did not necessarily have as second generations, have a real grasp of their natural, their initial language, and hadn't yet grasped the complexities of the English spoken here in New Zealand, and their children had really suffered for that. These are the issues out there that teachers in the primary schools, the intermediate schools and the secondary schools face on a daily basis. How to communicate with kids that perhaps need a little bit more time. Putting
adding 2 more of them into that class.
It fits in what Phoebe is saying at a tertiary level. It's the same song here. For Treasury to get in, it's motivated by dollar. We know that they were driving down the education portfolio vote, going across the amount of money going to education. We knew the government was doing this, and this is a consequence of it.
Phoebe, Treasury say education results have remained static. But seeing as New Zealand's public education system consistently rates as one of the best in the world, remaining static is quite an incredible achievement, isn't it? What are Treasury trying to do here? We know the problem is with the tail end, the long tail of kids at the bottom who are underperforming. But most of our kids going through public education are doing quite well. What are they trying to get?
Well, they're trying to reduce the budget, aren't they? And at the moment, they're doing a big public relations exercise where they send groups of pupils in schools across the country to come up with what they would do, you know, if they were Treasury to reduce class size.
Yep.
Well, it's not really their place. They're not the education experts. I would argue that this is completely out of line for Treasury. As a teacher myself, I can tell you now that class size is very important. This idea that an exceptional teacher might be able to allow the addition of 10 extra pupils, well, I would consider myself an exceptional teacher, and I still would say that the class size does make a difference.
I'd say something quite sinister here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I wonder whether or not the charter schools model is based on how many bums on seats you've got. That if they were going to actually put it out to the business sector, they want to maximise their profit. It's a given, right? Yeah. The more kids in the class, perhaps, is how that profit is going to be milked from.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also a way of, you know, when we're rejiggling the education budgets to look at, you know, how we might be able to put the onus back onto teachers. Really, I mean, if we look at things like early childhood education, I think it was 107 million that they raised the budget by, but they were also looking for cuts of $268 million in savings by getting less, you know, early childhood care providers to be registered. So, you know, there is a kind of jiggling with the books that is going on at the moment. It's a very convenient argument for it to consistently be pushed back onto the teachers.
Should the question to both of you, should the teachers associations, should teachers be concerned when Treasury have them in their sights?
Yeah, they should be concerned, and I think, you know, the whole education sector, those that are actually out there teaching or have anything to do with it, are very good in this country of actually showing what cause of these problems are and what effect failing policy has on their ability to get good outcomes for children or students. That's the end of the day, really. At the end of the day, I think that the Treasury's move can potentially undermine the good outcomes for students and children, and that's a shame.
Teachers, are you concerned that Treasury are targeting you?
I think they should be very concerned, yeah, and I think it comes back to it being completely out of their guidelines. They're not education experts, and I think that part of the problem that's going on with this teachers debate is that it is about, you know, National Party having their sights on the PPTA, right? But at the end of the day, teachers are the, you know, people that we really need to respect, and we really need to take on some of their and other educational experts' knowledge on how to run good schools.
Final question, do you think, either of you think 6-week courses to churn out teachers is the solution?
No, it certainly is not.
No, absolutely not.
Thank you, panel. Moving on with issue 3 tonight. Before Nick Smith resigned, he announced the slow strangulation of local councils. Why? Phoebe, governments say local councils have borrowed too much, but the majority of debt is for infrastructure and social services that the government won't pay for. The rationale is that if councils don't run the services, it will motivate the market into picking them up and stimulate growth. Is that a fair assumption to hope for?
Well, do we want more casinos, or do we want things that actually benefit the people of cities like Auckland? I mean, I note also in those figures that they've been statistics, New Zealand do not include the rates remissions. So there was a lot of contention over that. For example, they said New Plymouth was the highest one in terms of its rates increase, and they were saying it was 11%, but New Plymouth Council was saying it's actually 7% once you include the rates remissions. So I think, you know, I would agree with what Selwyn was saying earlier, is that what we are seeing at the moment is central government trying to take control of the local regulatory processes.
Is this something that a deeper philosophical change that's going on? There has been a recognition that it's the authoritarian capitalist countries of the world that are doing quite well, not the democratic capitalist countries. And you're actually seeing, especially with the super ministry that Joyce is now creating, that there is more of a centralisation of power than we've probably ever seen, maybe since Muldoon's time.
Yeah, it is a centralisation of power, but I think it is also about, you know, as you say, an ideological perspective that private partnerships are best, and how can we remove power off these people in order to be able to encourage that. And I don't think that that is, you know, very well thought through, actually.
It's going to cost us more, aren't we, if we're bringing external contractors in to do services that we were already running, won't it?
It will, and this has been part of the problem when we have had cuts in these ministries and so on, is that often people that have been fired fired, come back and are able to charge 5 times their rate that they were working for when they were paid. And, you know, the thing is that there are, you know, privacy measures that protect some of those salaries being released. So we are not really aware how much, you know, consultants are coming in and being paid.
Selwyn, Gordon Campbell has written a devastating critique of what these new constraints will create, using Colorado as a terrifying example. Why are we implementing ACT Party fantasies as policy?
Because the National Party has gravitated more to the ACT camp. We can see that it controls the ACT Party. We have a former National Party Cabinet Minister, John Banks, as the leader of the ACT Party on his own there, but surrounded by colleagues of like mind. That's why, to answer your question. But this is, you know, as Phoebe was talking about, the centralisation of this. It's an interesting one, and I pick up what you're saying about the ideological definitions of this. We have 2 things coming into play here. One, we have an authoritarian capitalist type of government. But at the other thing, we have a neoliberal economic structure to that. Less government, but then basically smaller government controlling other bodies that traditionally in convention would suggest that it never has in the past in this country. The economic environment has put this new cabinet of John Keys into a mindset, I think, where it's thinking we cannot risk not to actually control what the councils are doing.
Right.
We need to legislate to control. But that's alien to their free market kind of ideology.
It is. It's interesting watching it.
This is why this particular piece of legislation, the reform of local government that Nick Smith was in charge of, needed somebody of his intellectual grunt to actually get it through. If you're in their shoes, they do not have anyone to get that through now. And that's what the concerning thing is.
I think, though, that this is just not national. This was also something that Labor wanted, because many of these changes are actually harking back to the Local Government Act.
But I can understand it from Labor.
So
that was very
hands-on. It is a central versus centralisation versus the devolved power of the council. I think there has always been that tension here. Now we're seeing it ramped up.
I would suggest that there may be a connection, and Cam's not here to kind of quiz him on it, Cam Slater. But we know Cam Slater and his family very, very, very closely knitted to local government. We see a minister in the National Party that is actually moving to control local government. It's against the ideologies of the Citizen and Ratepayers bloc.
That's right.
And then we see that minister basically taken out by information that has been leaked. And I think there are a few dots here that start to actually make a line here. There are connections. And this is a National Party fight that is spilt out in a very bloody arena.
There was definitely a factional fight and an ideological change going on between Joyce and English.
Defining it on the hoof. You know, of how they actually respond to the situation. I don't think they've actually got it really worked out.
Question of both of you. If you add this reform to a list of other radical reforms recently embarked upon, is there a sense that National don't presume a 3rd term now, and that the pretense of moderation's over and they're just going to see how far they can go? Do you think that that's what we're seeing from National?
Well, I think that they're not banking on having a 3rd term, certainly. I mean, I think that they would certainly be trying to if they could, and that's why we see strategies from John Key, for example, like we were talking about before the show, where he waits until he's backed into a corner before he actually says anything. So there's this kind of hands-off at the same time as sending the ministers out to do the hard slog. No, I think that they're trying to push through what changes they can.
They've given up on the 3rd term. It's just go see how far you can
I think any party that's in government, if they think we get a 3rd term, that's a bonus.
Right.
You know, you could see how close it was for the Helen Clark-led government to win 2005 against Brash. Only just.
That's right. Let's wrap the show, ladies and gentlemen, with last word. Selwyn, your last word this week is?
My last word is in the foreign affairs area. Now, we know that the National-led government has slashed the public service, eroding into the number of diplomats that we have around the globe, arguably cutting off supply really for those burgeoning export businesses right throughout the country. I'm wondering, when is this government going to actually lap up the milk that it's been spilling all over the public service and merge the offices of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister, the office of the Minister of Trade
together. Genius.
Pull them together.
Yes.
It once was there, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Trade. In this day and age of screwing everything down, why doesn't the Cabinet do the same?
Good point.
Instead of pointing the bone at every other public service entity in the country. And my guess would be that when it's got the confidence to do so, or be forced, it would be Tim Grosser that becomes that minister, and Murray McCully, once he's passed his use-by date, is put into another portfolio.
Excellent. Something overseas, far away, Antarctica.
He's looking pretty tatty in the house.
Yes, he is at the moment. Phoebe, your final word?
Well, it would have to be the Ports of Auckland, wouldn't it? I mean, after the decision by the Employment Court yesterday evening that they would have to re-enter back into negotiations, I think about 25 minutes before we came back on they've announced that they will actually be doing a lockout in 2 weeks.
So extraordinary stuff.
Watch this space, yes.
Yeah. Crazy.
Is it going to get any better?
Well, I think that we are at one of the worst points in industrial negotiations in New Zealand that we have been in a number of years, and that this is not a fight that is going to die quietly.
Thank you, Sal, and thank you, Phoebe. Ladies and gentlemen, to my final word, the pantomime of farce that the police used to try and convict these so-called Urewera terrorists has come to a sad and sorry end that should serve as a constant reminder of what happens when you don't have enough internal checks and balances on the police. The cost to the taxpayer for this fiasco is utterly intolerable. Forget the visible $6 million in legal costs that eclipses any legal case before this. It's the secret $10 million in surveillance costs hidden from public view in the budgets of the GCSB and the SIS that need to be added, meaning this entire fiasco is actually closer to costing us $16 million. It isn't just this disgusting cost financially and socially that must be borne by the rest of us, but because of this police zealot blindness, we all have to accept the police gaining the power to break into our homes and spy on us with minimal judicial oversight. The National Party passed retrospective law under urgency to put a legal fig leaf over ongoing police surveillance tactics that were shown to be illegal. So we pay for police paranoia and have our civil rights eroded at the same time. New Zealand is a liberal democracy, not a crypto police state. Thankfully, the Urewera 4 jury recognised that this week. If you like tonight's show, please join our Citizen A Facebook site and connect with other like-minded news citizens, and follow me on my Citizen Bomber Twitter and Facebook page. Thanks for watching, whānau. Good night, Aotearoa.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.